Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The Spa in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is intentional living. Amazing people like you share ways to live by design and with purpose to ensure that this short ride of life occurs with choice, physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-giving knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and creating a positive impact through intentional living. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Natalie Quirarte, who by day is a certified financial planner, sharing creative financial ideas with her clients to live the best quality life possible. By night, Natalie has been studying universal intelligence, creativity, and energy since the early 1990s and shares her knowledge, perspectives, and ideas for creating a life that replaces friction with flow to help us always show up as our best versions of ourselves. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks for inviting me.
It's so good to have you here. So let's start with your insights in replacing friction with flow.
Okay. It's basically some beliefs and some tenets. So if in our lives we can decide that instead of meeting challenges with negativity, we choose a different perspective, we choose equanimity in all things. So sometimes it's stepping outside of yourself and sort of looking at what's going on from the outside in gives us a new perspective. For example, my son totaled his car yesterday, right? So when he called me to talk to me about it, he could have been all worked up and negative because he loved that car and it was his baby. And instead, he just said, yeah, I just totaled my car and now I'm just waiting for the CHP and I'm okay. And that's what matters, right? So it's having perspective so that we're not caught up in the negativity of these moments and these things that happen in everybody's lives, because it does, right? It's part of life. And it's just having a conscious mindset throughout the day. And it can starts first thing in the morning. First thing in the morning, you wake up in the morning and think about 3 things you're grateful for instead of having anxiety about everything that has to get done in the day.
I love this. This is so good because, one of the things is like, current research is showing that you cannot be angry and grateful at the same time.
That's
and
right.
It's actually a de-escalation tool that we actually use in our training about if you can really find out what you're grateful for, it pulls you out of that energy to just be present with what is. And so I think this is such a beautiful thing to be able to, build that tool and have that mindset. And, as we talk about, especially the last couple of years, and we know this was just a crazy period of time where people were just, nuts. Like you couldn't even have like a conversation with people without there being, depression or fear or anxiety, and just talk about people really being pushed to their limits in a lot of different ways. And so being able to maneuver fear and move through fear. I love your perspective about you can't have fear and faith at the same time. I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, it's impossible. So fear and faith cannot occupy the same space. Same thing that you just said, different words. Fear is, frankly, it's not intelligent. Fear is a choice, right? We can choose to be fearful in any situation, or we can choose not to be. We can choose to face that fear. Usually when we fear something, it hasn't even happened yet. I think it was Albert Einstein said or maybe it was Mark Twain. Mark Twain said something to the effect that most of the challenges I've had in my life have never even happened, right? It's just the fear of the anxiety, the stress of something. I'm afraid. We even have a phrase. I'm afraid if I do that, this could happen. Right. We have made fear a habit. And so what I am really working on is practicing in my life every day to change my habits, change the way I think about things, because when we live in fear, we're not living our best life and we're not living intelligently.
Right.
Nothing good comes from fear. Everything good comes from facing those fears, because fear makes us contract.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're living in a contracted space, similar to what you're just talking about, as we just went through the last few years, we were contracted, right? We were fearful. We didn't know what was going on. We are human beings, intelligent human beings, who were created to expand, not to contract. All of nature around you expands. We are no different. And so living in fear is a choice, and it keeps us contracted. We can never show up the best version of ourselves if we choose fear.
Right.
If we choose to face that fear, whether it's the fear of public speaking or the fear of walking out of your house or the fear of rejection of someone else, there are so many things, so many ways we can fear. We're quite imaginative.
True,
It's
true.
just so
Well,
unnecessary.
it is. It's interesting because, if you look at fear as like a tool and it's like an indicator, right? It's telling you something. I mean, there is, there's all the historical things about where it was saving you from the saber-toothed tiger, right? There was all these,
Sure.
actual things that were happening. But if we look at it as an indicator and not get stuck in it, right? And not stay in, I think that's more of the issue, is when you get stuck in fear. If fear shows up, right, we have the opportunity to be courageous, right? To move through it, to look at it, to really move through anything that shows up for us. And so it's such a beautiful thing to see and to be able to, examine our lives to see when we are presented with what would maybe be considered a fearful situation. What do we do in those moments? Like, how is it that we utilize it as a launching board to actually move through challenging things?
Mm-hmm. Well, recognizing it initially, right? Because
Yes.
we've created these habits, we don't even recognize our own behavior frequently. Surrounding ourselves by people who are not yes people, but people who will point out when we're being foolish in situations. I know people who are in poor relationship after poor relationship after poor relationship, and who do they go to for advice? People who are in poor relationships. It's really elevating our thoughts. It's really
Yes.
it's up in the game, right?
Yes.
It's not being satisfied with the status quo. It's understanding that the universe delivers to us whatever we ask. It's understanding how much power we have, that thoughts are things. Our thoughts actually create. And what we believe in every religion, it says the same things. What you believe, you will have.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not espousing religion.
Right.
I think part of moving through fear is having faith, not a religious faith, but a faith in knowing that things will work out regardless. And those of us who have gotten to a certain age have lived long enough and had enough life experience that we understand how that works. I think a lot of it is just choosing to believe, choosing to have faith, choosing to connect with all of the universal intelligence and energy and creativity. Look at civilizations before us. I've started studying basically the planet, if you will, all the different countries and the civilizations that came before us, and Stonehenge and Egyptian pyramids. And I mean, all over the world, you have these designs that actually were built by the civilizations who lived there. Some of them I've just seen recently, I didn't even know existed, that all are incredible. They were formed with incredible intelligence that we have seemed to lost somewhere along the way, right? How come all of this intelligence hasn't ciphered down to us? It's almost as though each generation starts over in this country.
Right.
We don't pass along this incredible knowledge and peace that's available. Instead, we pass along negativity.
Right. Well, and like you said, it's a choice, right? And we actually have all of that universal intelligence, all of that God-given strength within us, right? And it's about accessing it and being able to listen to that knowingness. I mean, that's one of the things that helped me survive through the years of police work and undercover work is being able to trust that inner knowing. And I think sometimes we get away from that and we get distracted with the different things that are happening in our life, and to really look at how we maneuver things, how we make choices, what that actually looks like. And you mentioned about taking relationship advice from people who don't have good relationships, and we look at what are some of the things that have disempowered us and how we move through those. And so I know you have a great example of moving through relationships for yourself and divorce, and I definitely want to hear that story of strength with the color yellow.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think it's interesting. I have a rapport with the color yellow. For me, it represents self-care and self-love, which is something I had never been introduced to until I was well into my 50s. Never even occurred to me, right? Being married, raising kids, doing all those things. It was always about everyone else. And I found myself in a situation where I had been in counseling in this relationship for like 8 months, every week, at least every other week. And I found things weren't getting better, they were getting worse. So I stepped outside of the picture. I got an Airbnb for a couple of weeks so that I could just gather myself, gather my thoughts, figure out my life. And I came to the realization I needed to leave the relationship. And so I had a counseling meeting coming up, and I was in such fear. I was so afraid to go there and tell my significant other and this counselor that I was done, that it was time for me to move on with my life and move on from there. I could not find the words. So for a couple of days prior, I literally lived in fear. I ruined those 48 hours of my life by being so worried about how I was going to present this information. And so what I do is I know the universe never disappoints. I know that for a fact. And so I always reach out and I say, give me the words that I need, give me the energy that I need, bring me the peace that I need to have poise and not harm anyone in this situation so that I can move forward. And nothing was coming to me, which is unusual because usually I'll get some kind of information that'll put my mind at ease and I'll know I'm good. This did not happen. So the morning I'm headed into the meeting, I'm just like, you got to do something. You got to do something now because I'm about to walk into this meeting.
Hello, I have you on tap.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. I walk in, I'm sitting there with my significant other. The counselor walks in and she is head to toe dressed in bright yellow. I mean, so you almost had to look away. So of course that symbolizes for me self-love, self-care. We immediately start a conversation around her outfit. It was something it was so distracting. And she said, yellow is a symbol of courage. And I looked at her and I said, that's interesting because for me, I've always thought of yellow symbolizing self-care and self-love. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, self-love takes courage. And right there, that was the universe giving me permission to speak my truth, to have courage, to be who I needed to be, to peacefully move on in my life. And that was a huge victory for me in terms of knowing that the universe always comes through. It's not in my time. And It's just a matter of me being aware. And it's a game changer.
Yes. Well, I just want to reiterate that for our listeners, because I know that, people get distracted. They might be driving, there's all these different things that happen. And so I just want to really ground that idea of that it takes courage to have self-love and self-care and to put yourself first. And there's so many things where people can say, oh, well, that's selfish or all that, but it's not selfish to take care of yourself, right? We cannot give from an empty vessel. We have to fill ourselves up and show up in that way. And, moms in particular are, just that perfect example of overgiving in so many ways because we want so much for our children. but we also need to be that example to them too, is that you have to restore yourself and you have to be in that way. And I love that that the color yellow comes in. That actually happens to be my mother's favorite color is yellow. So I always give her yellow roses. And for those who are maybe listening and not watching, they're not seeing this beautiful yellow sunset background that is happening behind you. So that color surrounds you. So it's such a beautiful thing to happen. And so as you move through this and you stood for yourself and you started regaining your power, we look at, the other side of that. I'm curious, what, if you now looked at the totality of this, what would you tell your premarital self to look for in moving forward into coming into relationship?
Well, that's an interesting question. I do not have any regrets about the marriage. I feel that a lot of good growth for me came from that. I think that I had a lot of lessons to learn. And the way that I learned them, for whatever reason, I needed to go through that marriage to gain the self-love, the courage that I needed to be who I am evolving into.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
I would say to speak my truth,
Hmm.
right? Not to be a people pleaser. I don't think you can trust people pleasers. I think I was definitely one, because when you're in that space of doing everything for everyone, it really is just to try to make yourself happy, and that can never make you happy, right? Trying to
Right,
fill everyone else's vessel, it's impossible to make everyone else happy. So
right.
I think I would, for my own children who are all grown now, I hope that I've been an example to them that you're never too old to make changes, that that they've seen me evolve, and we have discussions around that, about some of the changes that I've made in my life. And again, it all kind of goes back to everything in our life is a choice.
Hmm.
There is pretty much nothing, if you live in the United States of America, that you can't make a choice around. And so to move through life feeling like you're a victim of someone else's stuff is a myth.
Right, right. Well, and it's so great too. I love the distinction of, instead of looking at things as happening to us, but that they're happening for us. It's how we learn our lessons. It's really about how we evolve, and we can actually then turn around and support other people because we've been through challenging things. And knowing that we can do hard things, I think is one of the greatest lessons that we can teach our children. And it's good to be able to pull back the curtain and be able to tell them, like, hey, I get challenged with things. This is how I look at things. This is perspective. I mean, your son's, car accident. What a perfect example of, you could totally freak out in a situation like that, but to really look at the perspective of I'm alive. It's it's a thing, right? I can really rise above it and look at the situation for what it is. It's such an important distinction.
Well, and part of that I think is stemmed in the ability to be present, just
Mm,
to be right here, right now, in this moment. When we aren't taught that, we're taught to be doers and to get things done and to accomplish, and
right.
to make lists and check things off. And when we can be grateful and present in the moment, it changes everything. It changes, and it helps you have that perspective. Oh, that was just a car. Oh, I don't need that big house on the hill, right? It's just more to clean, or whatever it is. It changes your perspective around everything. Excuse me. When I take the time in the morning and just look outside, I have this beautiful garden, I guess you'd call it. It's nature. And when I just take the time to look at all the vibrant green colors and just sort of breathe it all in, it grounds me.
Mm.
I didn't live my life like this for most of my life, and I'm up there, right? I mean, for almost 60 years, I didn't stop to appreciate all the beauty that was around me, and
Yeah.
even the beauty in other people, and even the people that I might not necessarily think I like. What I've learned over time is I can learn something from them. Sometimes it's something I see about myself in them that I'm not crazy about. That's an opportunity for me to grow.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's I need to learn to just say goodbye, let's agree to disagree and move on. And other times there's this beauty that I just want to embrace. And I want to make sure that the people around me know how much I love them and appreciate them, because we're not given tomorrow. There's no promise there. We don't know how long we'll be on this planet. We do know we'll all pass, right? But we don't live our lives like that. We are not present enough to have that level of gratitude to appreciate everything that's happening right now.
Yes, absolutely. Being in that present moment and noticing, right? I mean, how many times have we driven and we get home and we're like, we don't even remember the path that we
Yeah.
drove, right? We get
Yeah.
into those automatic patterns. And, when you can go down a different road, when you can, open your eyes to something different, we get that opportunity to see different perspectives, which reminds me, we live life differently in our kitchen versus our living room or our bedroom. There are different versions that we create there. So what is your favorite room in your home and why?
That's a good question. My favorite room. So right now I'm in a little kind of a beach bungalow. So my favorite room is my kitchen dash family room dash office dash guest room.
A lot of dashes
I
there.
have all these I have all these windows and I see this amazing beauty. I have a little peekaboo view of the ocean. I have this beautiful lush greenery all around me. The joke here is that I'm the only person who can take a bath and empty the dishwasher at the same time.
That sounds like beach living.
And it's so different than how I've ever lived before, right? I've always had the big houses and all the stuff, and it's liberating. The other joke is that Natalie lives out of six. She has 6 boxes, so anytime I move, it's just me in 6 boxes, right? It is liberating not to have all the stuff in my life anymore.
Nice. I love that, because you get to be present, right? And, one of the things when I first left I retired from the police department and I was actually helping people with their spaces. And one of the things that I looked at was anything that you own owns you in time and maintenance.
Great point.
And so just to be able to ask ourselves, do I want to give my life force and my energy to managing all the different things around me? If they bring you joy and you love them and, you get to spend more time with the people that you love and do the things you want, great. But if they're sucking that life force out of you, we've got to be able to look at that and make some perspective decisions. So I love that you're very intentional about your space and how you live and what that looks like. And so speaking of intentional, I'd love for you to tell us about your events, like what they're about, how people can attend, and you are very much have your pulse on the moving and shaking of things behind the scenes.
Yeah, the events are really what breathe life into me. I think I'm here on the planet to sort of awaken people to the beauty in their lives, right? Because so many of us go through things on autopilot. So the events for me are a gift. And when I can share that with other people, it's amazing. Well, as you know, like with Epiphany, right? You were one of the speakers. So every year through our event company, Premier Group, we hold events for professionals, a lot of female professionals for the most part. It's just been the direction that we've gone in. And the events are really to create community, to strengthen bonds between everybody, to share wisdom and experience with each other. So we're not all reinventing the wheel. We have events on all different topics. When the state of California said that women had to be on boards, we had a Women on Boards event, which was a panel of CEOs and CFOs to educate businesswomen how they can be on boards. We have the Epiphany event every year, which is about creating an epiphany for every attendee. So in other words, when you walk through the door and you enter that room for the day, a truth will awaken inside of you that will change the rules of your life. You will not leave that event the same person you walked in, because when a truth awakens in you, you can't go back to living your life the same way. And it can be a small truth. It doesn't mean some big earth-shattering something, just some small truth that's already been in you, just needed to be rattled open a little bit. We have the What If event that we held recently, and we had some speakers. It was an afternoon followed by a happy hour, and it was about possibilities. What if we stopped fearing everything and we showed up the best version of ourselves every day? How would that change our lives? What if we went for that job that we know we can do, but our fear tells us, well, we can't do all 10 things, so maybe we're not qualified yet, right? What if we had faith that things were always going to work out? What if we believed that the universe is filled with energy and power and creativity, and that we actually can create, we can ask for what we want and actually receive it if we believe that? So that's really what the What If event is about. And that What If is gaining some momentum, and we're doing some other events sort of as a springboard off of that. And more people seem to want to hear about it. So we're being invited into companies, and it's gaining traction, and it's just so fun.
Yeah.
You know, when I don't know how many of the listeners are aware of the new James Webb Telescope. Remember, we had the Hubble telescope for so long. That's
Right.
all I remember in my lifetime. Well, the scientists would point the Hubble telescope at this one spot, the size of a grain of sand, and all they would see is a black hole. There was nothing there. Well, so James Webb has this new telescope. So Mr. Webb creates this telescope. It replaces the Hubble. The scientists take the telescope, they point it to exactly the same grain of sand spot, and see thousands of colorful galaxies that have always been there. We just never saw them before. We just didn't know they were there. So the idea behind that is just, it's incredible. There's so much that's available to us, but because we don't see it every day, we don't see universal energy, we don't see how these things work, we aren't aware of how much power we have and the amazing life that we could lead if we just educate ourselves about these things and how to communicate, which is through our chakras. And it's just, everything is connected. I mean, we are made of the same matter that everything in the universe is. It's just a different ingredient, like same ingredients, just different measurements, right?
Right. Absolutely.
We're literally the same scientific compounds that the stars are made out of. Everything is connected.
Right. You know, I'm reminded by, you know, for those that have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, right? You know, we can literally just change our perspective by a degree and see a whole nother galaxy, right? See a person in a completely different light. You know, being able to, one of the things I just love about your events is that it poses these questions that we don't necessarily take the time to explore, right? And to be in community and to connect with other people. And it's so important for us to literally step out of the everyday routines that we do to see what's possible, to really look and see, you know, are we living our best life? Is this what we want to be doing? Is it the direction that we want to be headed? It's such an important way to look at things. So I love that. So just for fun, one of the things I was thinking of is, you know, what would your best friend dime you off about?
What would they do?
What would they dime you off about? What would they tell about you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I annoy people sometimes with my attitude, like especially when we're golfing. Hey, that was a great shot. You'll get it back on the fairway. They're like, just shut up, Natalie. Let's see. My kids would expose me for well, I'm goofy sometimes. Let's see. Gosh, everybody would have probably something a little bit different to call me out on. One of the things, I know what everybody would out me on. Here's something I do. Okay, so we're talking about creating, you know, being present, you know, but how do you do that, right? How do you start that practice? So what I started doing was I would maybe put on some classical piano music, because it gets me into a totally different state. Now I'm not thinking words and music, and you know, now I'm in my own head listening to this beautiful music in the background. That helps bring me present. So part of what we're talking about today for the listeners is come up with things that help you to, routines, right? That help you to become present and quiet your mind. But then, and this is what people would call me out for, this is where when I'm dating and I tell people things like this, they say, thanks so much. Can I have the check, please? Because one of the things I do, if I'm driving, remember you talked about your driving, you don't remember how you got where you are, I'll put the classical music on, and all of a sudden now I'm noticing more than the road, I'm noticing all the trees around me, and I'm looking at the sky, and I'm looking at the mountains that I've never even noticed before driving this road, for 3 years, because now I've expanded my consciousness. But what I do is a little breeze is blowing and the palm trees, and I'll wave. I'll be like, oh, hi. And I'll wave. I'm like, oh, look, they're waving. They're so friendly. It's a little crazy, but it brings fun into my life. It brings joy. It puts a smile on my face. So it does everything that I need it to do for me. But absolutely everyone I know calls me out about, just don't say that to people. It just sounds a little crazy.
You know what? That's how you know you're dating the right person, who laughs at that and who actually can appreciate that. And I think just to our listeners, let's just wave to nature today. Like, let's just get it out there.
It really works. You can't do it and not smile.
Okay, I'm totally doing this. So fun. Well, Natalie, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they best do that?
Best way to reach me is probably email. So it would be through my business email, which is Natalie at Hall PWA. That's Hall Private Wealth Advisors. That would be, you can find me on LinkedIn, Natalie Quirarte. You'll never spell it. I don't know what you can send it out to your listeners.
It'll be listed in our show notes, so people can.
Yeah, so connect with me through LinkedIn or through my business email, and that's probably the best way to reach me.
Perfect.
I'd love to hear from people. I get these conversations just fill me with energy, and and I think it's contagious. So.
Yes. Well, and you definitely want to get on Natalie's party list, because she's got the most fun events. And so you definitely want to make the time to attend one.
Yeah, we absolutely have fun.
Definitely. So as you know, our theme for this season is intentional living. So in what ways are you living an intentional life?
It's a great question. Every day that I possibly can, because I'm not perfect, I spend an hour in the morning and I'm studying meaningful books, and I'm meditating, and I'm getting my mindset. And sometimes I'm spending the time actually having conversations that I know I'm going to have in meetings. Sometimes I'm, so that I can create the positivity that I want in that meeting. So sometimes it's a little out there, but it's always an hour of time. And I set my timer on my cell phone. And if I get an interruption, I stop it. And I make sure I come back and I complete that hour. I call it just sort of my mindset hour. And it is one way of providing myself with self-care and self-love. And I absolutely am able then to show up the best version of myself everywhere I go. We have busy days, we all live in a pretty busy world. And it just helps me to ground and just be right here in this moment.
Oh, I love that so much. Someone recently mentioned to me, anytime someone wants to respond with, when they say, how are you? Instead of saying I'm busy, say I'm blessed, right?
Yeah.
It's a different perspective, right? It's about looking at life in a different way. And I love that you create that space for yourself, because we do have a lot of things that get thrown at us. And when we actually create the framework of how we want to show up and, really tuning up our mind to look at things in a way, and so that our spirit and soul can show up as that best version, then we're doing our job here. So
I love that. And one thing I've started doing, instead of saying I'm busy or I'm having a busy day, I just say I have a full day today. I have a full schedule. I have a full life. So for me, that speaks to abundance. So it's everything we're talking about is perspective, and it's just making choices.
I love it. So great. Well, I just want to thank you for being here with us today and sharing your wisdom and being a bright spot in my life.
Thanks, Diane. Really appreciate you.
You got it. And appreciate you and our audience out there. What are you doing to create and be courage, right? To have that courage to create the self-care, to really set yourself up for success in the day. So please share this for those that need to, take a little look at that, really get a chance to shift some of the activities and things that you do so that you can show up as that best version of yourself. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.